Big show tonight, including the wonderful Dai Lee. She will explain the thinking behind that big question she asked in Parliament that annoyed the Prime Minister. Lots of debate to be had, and we'll even have a little bit of fun with the acting ambassador from the United States to Australia. But I want to continue on with the breaking news this evening that Caroline has just brought you, that the ASIO director, Mike Burgess, has delivered the annual threat assessment. This is always a sobering speech. It is difficult to read, but to hear the seriousness in his voice is something I want to take a couple of seconds to talk about. Terrorism has many potential forms in 2026. A point that Mike Burgess made today is that people are being radicalised in a period of weeks, and it's often happening privately and it's happening online. It is not happening where it may have 10 or 20 years ago, where you were able to watch a person slowly but surely start to move towards the fringes of a community. This is in part how he refers to the multifaceted threat that Australia faces when it comes to terrorism, which is still declared to be probable in Australia.
We face multifaceted instability where state-sponsored aggression and domestic volatility intersect. At the centre of this convergence are the acute and persistent pressures of espionage, foreign interference and politically motivated violence. However, that perimeter is expanding.
For obvious reasons, you know that terrorism has taken the lives of people in Australia. Of course, we all know what happened in Bondi, but there are many facets of anti-Semitism that can lead to radicalisation, and that radicalisation can lead to people being targeted or killed.
We've already seen surging communal violence and preparation for sabotage. This diversity represents systemic challenge to our national security. Anti-Semitism is a case in point. Anti-Semitism is often seen through a narrow lens, when in reality it can originate from diverse sources, simultaneously challenging traditional definitions, assumptions and approaches. Sadly and illogically, hatred of Jews is one thing virtually all violent extremist cohorts have in common. Neo-Nazis are anti-Semitic. Islamic extremism is anti-Semitic.
He also says that radical right and radical left-wing groups equally can be anti-Semitic. Again, think about the task that our national security apparatus has to be across. With a multifaceted population, a porous border because of technology means the darkest ideas from other parts of the world, where they can come here live streamed or in an instant. The security services need to be on top of it, about not what is just being potential, what is being planned, but also what may be just around the corner.
Finally, our security environment has degraded. Great power competition is driving an insatiable appetite for strategic advantage. As a result, espionage and foreign interference are at extreme levels, while preparation for sabotage is growing in scale and sophistication. At the same time, politically motivated violence, which incorporates terrorism, remains an acute concern.
Now, what used to be radicalised religious sects that used to have things like places where they met, or literature, physical books and bookshops that were the previous front, well, now social media is the weapon by which hate is being delivered to the evil souls who are radicalised and seek to do innocent people harm.
Social media is amplifying and accelerating grievance narratives, eroding trust in institutions, promoting discord and inflammatory rhetoric, exacerbating polarisation and creating a permissive environment for violence. Whether online or in the real world, when intolerance is tolerated, when violent language and violent acts are left unchecked, they become normalised, reinforcing the impression they're acceptable and compounding the likelihood of further violence.
But the one clear, stark and truly frightening thing about the ASIO director's speech tonight is the threat of Iran. Iran is a state sponsor of terror. Iran is able to find proxies who find proxies who find proxies to carry out the evil intentions of this regime. We know that people with connections back to the worst of forces in Iran have been held responsible and are believed to be accountable for things like fire bombings and many of the anti-Semitic attacks that sadly too many people got used to over the past couple of years. But the ASIO director made it very clear that there is a chance that someone will be killed on Australian soil at the behest of powers in Iran, and there would be a direct link back to the heart of Tehran.
Thankfully, no one died as a result of these arson attacks, but I do worry that one day an Australian will be killed at the hands of a foreign government here in Australia. And my concern is only heightened by the possibility that the Iran-backed group conducting attacks in Europe could expand its operations, including to Australia.
It does not become more sobering than that. Now, we have to trust that every piece of technology, every bit of nous, every bit of intelligence, every bit of insight helps to prevent those attacks. And while we live in a largely peaceful nation, that is, at the other end of the world, the reality of a quarter of the way through the 21st century, the bedrooms and backyards of Australia are interconnected to the furthest flung parts of the world with the darkest of intentions for us. I wish nothing but strength to the arm of every man and woman in our law enforcement agencies. It is also our responsibility as citizens to always report what we see to be behaviour that is heading in the wrong direction. Again, this is one of those speeches that I think we won't just talk about for days, but marks a true moment of Australia changing, and that it has changed forever, and forever for the worse. Now, as you know, Pauline Hanson at the National Press Club a week ago today made the statement about wanting to focus on monoculturalism rather than multiculturalism. We've debated it for a week. You know everything that was said. Well, in the Senate today, Pauline Hanson used an opportunity to be able to speak freely, to reinforce her points and to push back against those that have tried to weaponise the concerns that she has had about the direction in which parts of our country are going.
In the past week, the far left have naturally taken my comments into the realm of utter fantasy. I was going to ban foreign food, and the Socceroos wouldn't have beaten Turkey under my policy. What rubbish. Predictable and pathetic.
Now, as you know, there have been those that have sought to pretend that somehow the Socceroos is the latest lightning rod about what Australia we live in versus the one that we think we live in versus the one that we want to live in. She, again, attacks that straight on.
People from different backgrounds and cultures and nations all wearing green and gold and representing one nation under one flag and succeeding under the same set of rules.
But simply, the concept of Team Australia, literally the Australian team, is what she sees as the ultimate rallying cry for the idea of us being focused on that umbrella that covers all of us that I talked about in great detail last night. Finally, she said what I think many common sense people in Australia would agree to be true, and I hope is still the majority view in this country.
If we're going to accept you, you must accept us too. That's not too much to ask. It's the bare minimum we should be demanding. It's where we should be drawing the line on things incompatible with our culture, like Sharia law, child marriages, roaming armed gangs, female circumcision, sex-selective abortion and the burqa.
Now, as you know, I'm quite fond of the term each way elbow. Why? Because, well, he likes to have it both ways. He likes to pretend that we will be transparent when in opposition, quite the opposite in government. Of course, we definitely won't do anything when it comes to negative gearing before the...
...in our country is we've got to build more housing.
Housing supply, affordability.
Social and affordable housing.
New affordable housing.
And this idea is not about social housing, housing commission as it used to be called. Principally, It is about the idea that people want to be able to make sure that, as I say, their kids, their grandkids will be able to follow in their own path and to be able to buy a piece of Australia. Now, it's not just because you want to have a particular financial asset, but because, as I'll explain in a moment, you need to pay for the back nine of your life, when eventually you need more help to be able to stay in your home or to be able to move to somewhere that will be able to take care of you in aged care. But again, for all of this to happen, and the budget where they congratulated themselves, for all of that to be a mark of a success is that more younger people would be able to buy a home. Now, again, for that to happen, as I've said, this budget does not address the fundamental issue, which is that you need to save a certain amount of money to be able to even get to 5% deposit, let alone the 10% which is required, let alone the stamp duty that exists when you are beyond that first home, moving into the next home or the forever home. Well, the truth is that the value of Australian homes is going down. The property market, property values, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, they have gone down and they have gone down fast. So the Prime Minister would say, hey, tick for me, look what I did. I made housing cheaper. But the reason why the politics of this is not going to work for the Prime Minister is because 2/3 of the Australian housing market need the value of the home to remain stable or go up. The Bureau of Statistics, remember, it shows that 1/3 of people, they already own their home. 1/3 of people are trying to pay off their home and 1/3 of people are renting a home. Now, presumably that home also is something that may well be having a mortgage or obviously has already been paid out already. And the reality is that in terms of the value of Australian housing stock, it's always a good bet. Wherever you get in, eventually it goes up, which is why you eventually will have money left over or way more money than you put in because, of course, interest rates, which also are increasing, make the capacity to pay off that thing that you bought for $1 million to eventually be worth 1.2, 1.3, 1.5 and even more. And the reason you need your house value to go up, the reason you need, if you are in the market, your property to be sold for more than you bought it is because even if you do downsize from the forever home to the smaller home, the unit block that you may be thinking about, well, the 2-bedroom unit does not cost what it did 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. You need to be able to either pay for it in cash or to be able to get to a position where whatever mortgage is left, well, essentially, it's much smaller and you'll be able to land the plane. It's also so when you eventually sell your house, as I say, you have enough money left over for aged care. And the reality of aged care is that aged care is more expensive than it has ever been for a whole collection of reasons. But again, all of the reports right now is that the value of a home that you are either paying off or that you have owned has gone down. Now, that supposedly is a good story, right? Because if what was originally worth $1 million is now worth $900,000, well, then the person who hasn't bought one doesn't need $1 million, they need $900,000, right? So therefore, that is the government doing the right thing, according to their own perverse, weird logic. But when asked about it today, clueless Claire O'Neill, the housing minister, well, she doesn't want to take ownership of what is supposedly the entire reason why they have completely rejigged the federal budget.
Look, I think the housing market's cyclical in Australia, a very uncontroversial comment. We see periods of very significant house price growth and then we see the market make a correction, and that's what we're seeing at the moment.
So we're in a market correction now?
That's correct. I don't think that's controversial at all. We've just been through what has been extremely high house price growth in the period from COVID, basically before COVID, to today.
So if every decision you made in the federal budget was to push down the amount of money that somebody would need to get into the property market, then yay, right? Oh, but no. 2/3 of the property market, or you would argue everyone who owns anything in the property market, including something that's being rented out, you need it to continue to rise in value, not to remain static, not to go down. She was corrected today by the Treasurer. No, we're not in a housing correction because technically that would be a 10% reduction. So well done, Albo. Well done, Claire. Inflation and cost of living. We got more numbers today about inflation that, yes, the headline number is ever so slightly down. Why? Because of the reduction in taxation that's being taken particularly from things like petrol right now. But the core inflation remains too high. But, of course, there's a reason for that, isn't there, Dr. Chalmers?
The costs and consequences of the war in the Middle East will be felt for some time, that those costs were felt initially when it came to petrol prices. That's why we stepped in and stepped up with the fuel excise cut. But they are broadening in our economy, and the big standout in that regard is dwelling construction costs. OK, so could somebody please explain, if the war in Iran is the reason for everything, how does that affect the cost of building a house? How does that affect clothing and footwear? How does that affect education, which last time I checked doesn't require the importation of anything, let alone alcohol and tobacco, let alone health care in the country, let alone soft drinks, let alone insurance? Now, again, trying to work out whether interest rates are going to go up, stay the same or go down. Again, all of this data because of the numbers in the middle of it. The core inflation, the suggestion is the Reserve Bank most likely next time they meet, it goes up. If not, then it definitely goes up 1 month after that. Again, well done, Prime Minister, well done, Treasurer, well done, greatest government of all time. Now, you remember earlier in the week, the Prime Minister was not happy at a question that was asked by independent MP Dai for the seat of Fowler in Sydney's southwest. Remember, this was a place where the unions could pick the candidate, the Labor Party would be able to hold on to this seat, and who cares who actually lives there? Well, one of their own, a Vietnamese refugee, of course, fought back and became that MP. And she does not miss when she asks questions in Parliament.
Prime Minister, the capital gains tax and negative gearing changes announced in the May budget were significant and market-sensitive measures. So significant, your government has already walked past of them back in recent days. Can the Prime Minister give the House a strong assurance that no government MP or their close relations used prior knowledge of those changes for private financial benefit before they were made public?
So the member for Fowler, if she's got a suggestion or an allegation about anyone in the chamber, she should actually say it, what it is, and preferably say it outside.
Order.
This isn't a council. This is a serious parliament. We were very careful, as always occurs, and I'm sure, as has always occurred for as long as I've been here across the board, whoever has been the Treasurer and gone through our ERC processes. That is something that we have in this country that we should cherish and we should honour, not denigrate to try to score a cheap point.
I spoke with Dai from Canberra a little earlier tonight. I began by asking her, why did she ask that question of the Prime Minister?
From my perspective, as you know, the changes to the CGT and negative gearing has huge ramifications on the market. It's market-sensitive information. So I think my question, I think people are really turning this around. It's actually about the system. It's about getting the assurance from the Prime Minister that there were guardrails in place so that these major decisions has huge impact in the markets. And we want to know, who knows what, when it was known, and whether or not anyone within the government or connected to them are aware of such information that are having, like I said, market-sensitive information, and did they act on those knowledge prior to it becoming public? As we know, people out there, the Australian public, Australian workers, any changes to the tax system, ordinary working Australians find out about it in the media or down the track, and they are scrambling to understand how that will impact them. Be you a young person saving for a deposit in a home, or trying to sell your shares. None of that information is actually available until it's announced, and of course it's still being dissected. So from my perspective, that question was around assurance, guardrails, and who knew what, and when was it known, and was there guardrails in place? As we know, the Labor Party has caucus. There's a caucus system. So therefore, any major decisions are also discussed at caucus. So just wanted to really have that assurance, and I have no doubt the public want that assurance as well from our Prime Minister.
And the Prime Minister was as direct as he could possibly be, that he believed there was no concern in and around the issue. And then he got very personal in the answer. What did you think of the swipe that he took at you as essentially somebody who's not up to the mark because you're bringing low-grade council issues or council-style politics up in the federal parliament?
Yeah. Look, you know what? I think that was really belittling council, which is the third level of government. And we all know that that third level of government has the most connection to the communities. And I think, and the funny thing was that on that day, there were councillors and mayors down in Canberra for the local government week. So for him to dismiss council as if, I mean, can I tell you at council level, the council have more, there are more compliance and more regulations and more declaration very upfront. If you ask any council, they will tell you straight away. Were there guardrails in place? Absolutely. There's none of this that's dancing around where there are guardrails in place for major policy changes like that. So I think. But then, of course, the Prime Minister talked about how he's very well connected or have done a lot of things for local government. And yet in the same breath, he kind of said, this is not a council meeting. Well, I can tell you in a council meeting, we're very organised, at least in my council. And we get answers if there are questions raised. So, look, it's up. The public will see the Prime Minister's behaviour and his answers to me for what it is. I just stood up and I asked him to actually show respect in the House because he's somebody that has talked about let's do politics differently. And I think that the way that he responded and the way that he took a snipe at me, Paul, I have been taught that in politics, you play the ball, not the man or the woman in my case. And I think that we need to focus on that in politics, to look at the bigger issue, to answer the questions and not to make it personal.
Now, we know that the majority of Australians are not happy with the budget, not happy with the Prime Minister at the moment. 6 out of 10 in our poll here, put together by YouGov, say they're dissatisfied with the Prime Minister's performance. Let's take it down to Fairfield. Let's take it down to your community. What are you seeing, hearing and reading? And are there things that would otherwise not really get involved in politics that have become enlivened by the decisions made in this budget?
Look, I think it's not just the budget, Paul. I think that since last term when I got elected, I have spoken about the cost of living, and it's more so now as obviously, rent has. We are in Fowler, in particular in southwest Sydney. We have what we call the rental stress. About 46% of my, residents in my electorate actually rent. So there's implications for the changes in negative gearing in CGT because rent will go up because it's just the way that, obviously landlords is going to put up rent. That has ramifications, impact on those, who are renting. Not only that, the cost of groceries have gone up. Energy prices, as you know, I've been, banging on about that. That is still a big issue in our community. And, of course, affordability of buying a home. A medium house in Cabramatta is about 1.2 million. So the policies that the government have released in this budget, none of that is actually going to bring down the prices of homes currently. So from my perspective, people are still struggling with the cost of living. A group of school kids came to see me this week and they said, there's a cost of living, and this is year 6 telling me that there's cost of living in the community. So cost of living still very much front and centre of people's mind.
Well, Dai, more strength to your arm. Keep banging away. You're the one asking the questions. You're the one brave enough to take it all. And as we spoke about last night in this conversation about, Australian culture, all the rest of it, I love that you're the one wearing the national flag. It's the Prime Minister and his mates that are trying to sort of hide it behind the 2 other ones they prefer. Always great to talk to you, Dai.
Thank you, Paul.
She's great, and as you know, we played you there the comments of the Prime Minister rejecting that there was anything other than the correct process that had been followed.
Yeah, but Pauline, I think
G'day from Aus Politics Report. Imagine opening your front door and discovering the alarm has been going off for weeks and the person in charge of security has only just mentioned it in passing. That is the mood in Canberra right now, because ASIO's chief, Mike Burgess, has walked into a microphone and told Australians the threat picture has changed, and not for the better. Radicalisation, he says, is now happening in weeks, not years, often privately and entirely online. Iran is flagged as a genuine state sponsor of terror with a credible capacity to strike on Australian soil. And anti-Semitism, he warns, is no longer the pet project of one ideology. It is being shared across neo-Nazis, Islamic extremists and both extremes of the political spectrum. If that does not get your attention, nothing will. Now, enter Pauline Hanson, right on cue. A fortnight after her National Press Club speech, she is standing by her push for what she calls monoculturalism. And the internet has decided to lose its collective mind. Before the outrage machine kicks in, her point is narrower than the headlines suggest. It is not about banning cuisines or footy codes. It's about shared identity. One flag, one set of rules. The way the Socceroos wear the same jersey regardless of where their grandparents were born. Her harder line, though, is the part people argue about. The mutual obligation that says if we're going to accept you, you must accept us. With practices, she names, including child marriage and other cultural norms, singled out as incompatible with Australian values. Love her or loathe her, the debate she has reopened is not going anywhere.
And here is where the two threads collide. Because while Canberra argues about identity, families are arguing about the rent. The budget claims to be fixing housing, but falling prices are being dressed up as a win. Paul Murray and independent MP Dai make the same uncomfortable point. Roughly 2/3 of Australians own a home, carry a mortgage or collect rent, and a falling market hurts more people than it helps. The real barriers, deposit savings, stamp duty, interest rates, are barely touched. Meanwhile, the Treasurer blames inflation on the Middle East war, while the Housing Minister calls the same slide a correction. They cannot even agree on what is happening, let alone fix it. Remember to like and subscribe to Aus Politics Report. Now, Dai has forced a moment that should embarrass everyone in that chamber. She asked a simple question: can the government guarantee no MP or advisor used advanced knowledge of capital gains and negative gearing changes for private financial gain? Instead of an answer, the Prime Minister dismissed it as council-level politics, which is rich, coming from a government that promised to clean up integrity. Council governance, by the way, is where the transparency actually happens, which is exactly why the question stings. Play the ball, not the person, Dai said, and for a few seconds the whole circus went quiet. Step back and the pattern is unmistakable. A security boss warning the alarm has been ringing, a senator reopening the identity wars, a budget that talks supply while ignoring the people priced out, and an integrity question treated as an insult. In Fowler, where Dai works, nearly half of renters are in stress, and the median home in Cabramatta sits around $1.2 million. 60% of Australians are unhappy with the Prime Minister. Even school children are asking about the cost of living. That is not a collection of separate stories. It is one national crisis wearing 5 different masks. Thank you for watching Aus